Is there anything more satisfying than filling up a brand new palette with paint? I don't think so. So I thought I would film the process and you can join me in filling up my summer studio palette. This is a Magello 33 well palette. It has a little extra mixing area that pops out there. And I thought that this would be good because, as you can see here, there are 11 wells and 3 columns of 11 wells each. So I think that this is going to be a really great addition to my studio. I'm not known for my reduced or limited palettes. I really love convenience colors. So let's examine all of my paints and see what I can use to fill this up. If you're new here, welcome to my channel, Voluptas Ocularum. It means pleasure of the eye. My name is Stephanie. I'm a Canadian who lives in the UK, and I have been on a real art journey over the past year and a half. I work primarily in watercolor, but I do some mixed media as well. And I really enjoy watching other people's videos. So recently I've started sharing my videos on different art materials, different palettes, my sketchbooks, and some of the paintings that I've completed over the past year and a half. So let's look at this. This is my Swatch Bible. It is a huge 4-inch binder where I keep all of the watercolor swatches that I have in my collection. I organize all of my swatches by color and by brand. And I think that this helps me compare across brands. And on each swatch, I place the color name, the brand name, the pigment name, and some of the other information. I haven't been super consistent in exactly how I place these on each swatch, but I do tend to use the same paper over time. I use a Meeden cold press watercolor paper for all of my swatches so that the look and feel is comparable across brands. So what I'm doing now is just going through the Swatch Bible and picking out all of the swatches that I'm interested in. And this is kind of based on my knowledge of the colors that I have been using over the past year and a half, and which ones I tend to reach for the most. Another consideration is whether I have these available in tubes or not, and if I don't have the tubes, if I'm really committed to the color, whether I can actually get them in tubes. Now I'm organizing all of my selected swatches into their related hues and just starting to put them in some kind of color order. I tend to be drawn towards very similar colors across brands, and so where I had the possibility of multiple options for a color, I pulled all of the swatches where I knew I had tubes available, just so I could really take a deep look at the swatches next to each other and make a final decision about them. I have a particular way that I like to organize colors in my palettes, and I don't go row by row left to right. I go left to right and then right to left and then back again. Finally, I'm going through each swatch and comparing each of the characteristics of the colors I've selected to see which ones I really want to put into this palette. And sometimes that's based on the fact that I might have a larger tube of a paint, and so I just want to use it up. And other times it's based on things like, oh, this is a single pigment versus a multi-pigment mix. There's a variety of factors that I consider in this selection process. And sometimes it's just because I really, really love the color. I faffed with the order quite a bit, and I wasn't really happy with it until I made a little breakthrough, which is that I wanted to progress from my yellows, oranges, pinks, and reds through to my browns first, and then move on from the browns to the purples or the more violet colors, into the blues, and then across the blue range and down into the turquoise, aqua, and getting into the green colors. So I basically ended my palette on the greens. This is some, glamour shots of my final color selection and how I've laid it out and how the colors sort of relate to each other. And then I just kind of put all the swatches into some different orders just to be sure that I was really happy with this collection of colors. I did select some colors that I don't typically use because I was thinking I really need to try some brighter colors. I have been more drawn towards earthy and muted colors, but I really want to do a little more mixing. So after I decided I was happy with my color selection, I went into my storage containers and I found all of the right tubes. There are a couple colors that I had to order tubes for. So the Gallo paints, I only had those as pans, but I really, really wanted them. So I kind of made sure that the colors I selected were available in tubes. And then Jackson's was having a watercolor sale at the end of July. So I did take advantage of that and order a few tubes. Now you'll see that there's nothing for the burnt sienna in the second row at the far right, and that is because I really wanted to use a White Nights color that I had in pan form, but I had to wait for it to arrive, so I wasn't able to fill it as part of this first part of this video. So let's fill up the paints, and I really, I don't know why, but it was a kind of a challenge for me to get started. I think just the idea that I'm squeezing paint out of a tube into a palette makes me think like, oh no, I'm running out of paint. Look, these 5mm tubes are going down so quickly. I'm gonna have to reorder soon. But you know, that's not what that means at all. This is an exciting journey, and I pour these into pans all the time with no issues, but for some reason, putting it into a palette feels a little bit different and more concrete. I have some colors in here that I absolutely love, and I have placed all of the names and the pigment information and the brand information at the top of the screen. So in case you see a color there that you think looks really great, you can think about whether you want to add it to your palette. All right, I had my first major boo-boo here, which is that instead of leaving a space for the burnt sienna that I had ordered, I went right ahead into the burnt umber. This palette is already a little screwed up, but that's fine. What is an artist palette for but to be a reflection of your mental state at all times? I did fortunately remember to leave a space for the ultramarine blue because I was kind of waiting to decide. I ordered a tube of the White Nights ultramarine blue deep, and I also had an Gallo tube of the ultramarine dark. And I just couldn't choose between them, so I thought I was going to wait till I got the tube from White Nights before I made my final decision. So ultimately, it kind of worked out with my colors, even though the burnt sienna was missing from that row. I just worked my way through the rest of the paints in the order that I had placed them, and then I put the burnt sienna at the very end of the greens, which kind of worked because it's still in the zone of the other browns, and burnt sienna is not that far off as an earth color from green gold, so I didn't feel like it was, you know, gonna ruin my life or anything. Some of the colors that I've placed into this palette are real favorites of mine, and some of them are new that I haven't used before, like this permanent green pale and the Magello Mission Gold Van Dyke Green. But I'm really excited to use them because when I looked at them in comparison to some of my other swatches, I thought they were going to work really well. So now I just decided to stir the paint, and in some cases I added a little gum arabic to some of the paints that I know dry out really quickly and maybe crack a little more. Some pigments are just a little drier, so I gave them all a little stir if I felt they needed some help dispersing around the paint pans. And I just used a little toothpick to do this. Some of the paint settled really nicely in the pans, and so here we have a good look at what things are looking like right now. This is where the burnt sienna is going to go. And then I have a few options for the ultramarine slot, but I'm thinking I might go with this White Nights ultramarine dark just because it's so intense and it's got this most beautiful granulation. So if the paint tube is anything like the paint pan that I have, I will definitely be using it there. Let's do a little pan over the palette as it stands so far before I fill in those last two slots. And the first thing I think when I see this is that I'm just really excited to use it. Like, not only do the colors look good on the swatches that I have, but they look good in this palette. Like, they look juicy, they look exciting, they look bright and vibrant. Like, I actually just want to dip my paintbrush right into those paints immediately instead of waiting for them to dry. Okay, now I'm putting the paint away. I keep them in these little plastic clear storage containers, and I have tried to separate them by brand, although sometimes I don't have enough of one brand to justify its own container, so I pop them in with similar ones. So for example, I put the Gallo ones in with my Mary Blue colors because they're both Italian. Yeah, that makes sense, right? The Magello one goes back in its case, and then I'm just going to close this up and let it dry for a couple days while I wait for my new paint to arrive. Within the past 2 days, my desk has managed to become the hot mess express. This is very typical for me. A clean desk does not stay clean for very long in this household. I did receive the last tubes that I was waiting for, but when I did some comparisons, I realized I actually like the Gallo Ultramarine Blue better than I like the White Nights tube version of that paint color. So I decided to go with the one I already had, but I was still happy with the Burnt Sienna from White Nights, so I added that in. And this is what everything looks like now that it has been totally filled and every slot is complete. So I noticed a few little issues, specifically with the M gram paints, and these were binder separation issues, and I think that was due to the honey content. And then some of the paints, as you can see, have already dried very quickly. So what I did with the M gram paints is I just gave them a little stir with a toothpick again and reconstituted them, and hopefully that inspires them to stay in their own place. Okay, now the point we've all been waiting for, and this is swatching the palette. So I love the process of swatching. I prepared this swatch sheet on Arch 300 GSM cold press paper, and I divided it up as best I could. I measured this so that it would fit on the inside lid of this palette. I don't like to laminate my, my swatch cards, so sometimes I keep them taped to the outside of a palette, but I like usually just popping them in as long as I'm not worried that the paint is going to stick to them. If I am, then I might just put a piece of wax kitchen roll or kitchen paper inside to separate them. But I like the feel and the texture of paper, so when I take up my swatch cards, I like to be able to feel what the paper feels like and not have the glare of lamination on it. So as I swatched these out, I confirmed for myself that I was happy with all of my color choices and that I had made the right selections. I'm specifically very happy that I waited for that burnt sienna to come in. So I just went over each of the swatches with a glaze on one side because I know that, you know, the drying shift in some colors is quite pronounced. So I wanted to just give every color a fair chance to see how deep and rich it could appear, specifically on cotton cold press paper. So I went through and did that, and honestly, the difference is crazy, isn't it? Like when you layer up watercolors and you see how intense they can become after just a couple of layers. So yeah, that's kind of like a reminder to me when I'm working that just because a color may appear lighter than I was expecting doesn't mean I can't intensify it with another glaze over top. So here are the final swatches, and I'm just going to pause it here in case you want to take a screenshot. I'm just going to highlight some of my favorite colors that I've been using. Buff Titanium, Raw Sienna, Quinacridone Gold, the Quin Rose, which is absolutely stunning, Potter's Pink. Terra Rosa is a new one for me, but I can't wait to use it. Cinquesia Maroon, which is a PR206 pigment, which is absolute ride or die for me. That Volcano Brown by Schmincke, Lavender by Rembrandt, the Lunar Blue by Daniel Smith, which is a standout color for all kinds of landscapes, Cerulean Blue, Nordman Green, which is one of the few PG7 pigments that I actually enjoy, Sap Green, and Green Gold by Daniel Smith, which is something I don't know if I could live without. This is the palette now as it's all full and all swatched out. I'm really happy with my color selection, and I am really excited to get started using this in the studio. Thank you for joining me on this swatching and filling adventure. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.